history. We touched on it a little bit in the last hour and talking about current events and how it pertains to history, especially Constitution and what presidents do and what they know to do. We're joined by Brady Kreitzer. Brady is an author. He's a historian and he's an educator at CCBC and Robert Morris University. He has written several books, the most recent one, The Whiskey Rebellion, A Distilled History of an American Crisis. Brady, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back on. Good to meet you finally in person.
It's been a long time. Yes,
yeah, we've done this by phone on a couple of different occasions. But as we were getting ready for the show and as we're talking about it, we were talking about some of the changes in the country today. And social media was one of those. And I've heard it many times in recent days that social media is what is driving a lot of conflict and commentary in our world today, not just in our country.
Yeah, social media is wonderful because it lets you spread any idea you'd like. You don't need a television show or a radio show to get your opinion out. But social media is also terrible because it lets you spread any idea that you'd like. And there's no fact checkers on that. So the fact is, kind of nefarious actors, foreign governments have capitalized on that to generate, using AI, false news and memes, and people share it and they don't think twice about it. So a lot of misinformation travels around, and you have to be, I always tell people, vigilant on what you're looking at and able to discern truth from reality. But I have to say it's getting harder.
Yeah. And you said something that I didn't even think about when I brought it up in the last hour. And that is the story out of Minnesota and the woman who allegedly hurled a slur at a young Somali boy, and now it's gone viral. Somebody always has a phone with a camera on it, so you should always be ready to be on film somewhere. Somebody's taping you somewhere. But that you said, well, what if? And it's a good food for thought. What if this was done by a bot? What if this was AI? Explain that.
Well, I've gotten to the point where I question any and everything that I see online. So let's say you had, and the AI technology, for those who don't know, it's very capable of something like this. Let's say you have footage of two actual people and AI changes them or morphs them and makes this artificial exchange that never happened. And race is always a hot button issue. Let's say that person that made that AI creates this video, gets people fired up, and then they create GoFundMes, one for each aggrieved party, and then we all donate money to them. So that one AI person collects over or almost $1 million based on an event that never happened. Now, I'm not saying that's what this is. I'm not here to promote conspiracies or this and that, but the world we live in now, I mean, nothing like that would ever surprise me. And that's why I'm always cautious about anything I see on the internet.
And it is so interesting. But a lot of people, as we know, get their news from the internet.
Most people entirely, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. As a person who teaches history, what does this say to you? And what do your students want to know about it?
Well, my students 100% get their news from the internet. It's good that people want to know what's happening in the world, and social media allows that to happen instantaneously. If there's an explosion in China, we know about it within a minute. It's a really remarkable thing. But as Americans, we've always had this desire for news. Here's an example from just my research. The very first newspaper ever published in America west of the Appalachian Mountains was the Pittsburgh Gazette, and that's in the 1780s. And they ran, in some cases, 3 editions every day. People were hungry for news whenever they can get it. But again, now you don't have the editors, editorial staffs, you don't have fact checkers. It's kind of the Wild West. So we have to fill those roles ourselves. And a lot of people don't have the time or the resources to do that.
Mm-hmm. And if any students ask, they say, well, where can we trust the news?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't trust the mainstream news.
Yeah, I suppose start with Mike Romigh for sure.
Nobody trusts him.
No, reputable news sources. As I always say, there's a reason nobody watches C-SPAN because it just puts a camera in Washington and lets the drama play out. We want opinions. We want either love to hate or preach to the choir. We don't want boring straight news anymore. We want to we're almost addicted to that rise in your belly when you agree with something or disagree with something. So there's a reason very few people watch C-SPAN. And I say that as someone who's been on it. So I hope people at least watch that. But that's the idea. We're kind of, the media, advertising, business side of things knows exactly what we want to see.
Give the people what they want.
Yes.
And there's a long thought slogan that goes along with the news media, and I believe it wholeheartedly, is that we don't cover planes that land safely.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
If there's a crash, we want to be there. If they're landing safely, nobody pays attention to it. Mm-hmm. So that's what people want. And in short, we have short attention spans. So the Walter Cronkites of the days are long past because those type of newscasts don't exist anymore. They brought in lifestyle segments to the news and cut them up fast because the younger and younger generations just don't have that attention span to stay around for even a 3 or 4 minute story.
Yeah, you're looking at 15 seconds or less. I mean, look at the average, TikTok reel or Instagram, whatever. It's maybe even 10 seconds or less. That's, what can you do there? So commercials are now running 5 seconds or less. And it's just it's a changing time. I find myself, and this might be because I'm getting a little older, but I find myself losing interest in trying to keep up at times. It's, sometimes the good old days were better in some cases. But
I'm going to ask, you keep writing books.
Yeah.
How do people keep their attention to read the books you write?
You have to, you have to have a point. You have to have something to say. Economy of words. And this is for any writer out there. The days of kind of waxing poetically on and on, they're really gone. I have a new book coming out on the National Road that had a very strict limit, and that'll be next year, of 100,000 words. And it could have been 150,000 words. The Whiskey Rebellion was about 75,000 words. So there is a new element, and it's a skill for historians because we have mountains of research we want to share. But there's an element of you have to get to it fast, or at least you have to stay laser focused. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. If you've ever gotten lost in a book that you just can't finish, that's because they weren't getting to the point. If you're on point, the book will read really quickly. And I think I'm able to do that.
So they want you to get to the plot.
Yes. Stay focused.
Yeah. Any pictures?
Yeah, right.
Some people won't even pick up a book that doesn't have pictures in it.
Yeah, pictures are wonderful and helpful, time and a place.
Your interest in history, especially Southwest Pennsylvania history, the Whiskey Rebellion, where does that come from?
So it's really, it's from living here. I'm born and raised in Western Pennsylvania, educated in Western Pennsylvania. My whole life has been here, but in the 18th century, we are really at the vanguard of America in a lot of ways. I mean, America is looking to go west. Pittsburgh is essentially the capital of the western frontier. It's the most important city in, for example, George Washington's presidency in the West. And frontiers are places of blending of cultures and peoples that it has this really interesting dynamic. I'm a historian of the frontier. So for me, what's amazing is the more you learn about history, the more you realize you don't know. I can drive around anywhere in Beaver County, in Washington County, in Allegheny County, and find a historic site. I mean, we were, especially in the 1790s, really at the center of the most dramatic periods of change in the country. So, as soon as you think you have it figured out, you find something new, then that's a whole other rabbit hole. So we live in a great place for that, but that's where it comes from for me. It's seeing a place I thought I knew so well in a whole different light.
Mm-hmm. And when you do that, when you're doing all your research about it, you said 75,000, 750,000 words?
75. Oh, the Whiskey Rebellion is 75,000.
Okay.
Yeah. That's about 200 pages.
Yeah. So you're doing a lot of research, and then you have to come back to reality and live in 2025.
Right.
How do you make that juxtaposition?
The secret I always tell my students, and I don't tell them till the end of the semester, is that I always try to tie the class back to the modern era. But what I tell them is, you guys don't realize that we've been talking about today's world the whole semester. Historians have to, use history as a mirror to reflect on our own world. So even though it's in the past, even though it feels irrelevant, every historical topic ties to the modern era in some way, drawing parallels, seeing patterns. That's what we do. If we aren't trying to change the way we view our own world, then history serves no purpose. So there's always a greater lesson. And I think when you, as I say, stay focused on your topic, and you don't even have to hold people's hands and take them there. They'll make the connections themselves in some cases. You see the modern world all around us, no matter what the historical topic is.
Mm-hmm. And elected officials back in those days, same kind of officials as we have today. There wasn't as much money, I presume, involved in elections from those years, but corruption, did it exist back in those days?
Definitely not as much money. Think about this. If you look at the colony of Virginia or the early state of Virginia, say when we're making the Constitution, 1787. It has a population about the same size as Allegheny County and Beaver County, the whole colony, the whole state, think about that. And out of that one very small subset of people, we get George Washington, George Mason, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison. We get all of that from that little group. Again, what is today the equivalent of Allegheny and Beaver County? So when you look at the, say, for example, 2024 election, and you look at the candidates we have, you kind of have to think like, we have now 340 million people, and this is the best we got. Yeah, so I think it's a very different world. Politicians were viewed fundamentally differently, especially in the early period, the constitutional period. They aren't viewed as one of us, men of the people. I mean, they're viewed as people who are elected because they, and this is very European, but they are better than you. They're wealthier than you. They're better educated than you. They are leaders. Whereas today they're representatives. We let politicians know, and I think this is a good thing, you work for us. Mm-hmm. That was not the mentality back then. So it was a very different republic. If you had brought the Madisons and the Monroes and the Jeffersons into 2025 and told them to fix our problems, they wouldn't know where to start. It's just different times, and different times require different minds. And I think our Jeffersons and Washingtons are out there somewhere. We just need them to speak up and take an interest.
Yeah, and what we're seeing today in a lot of town halls is that elected officials are being shouted down, people are being carted out. That's not so different than what it was back in those days, was it?
No. Nothing is new in history, especially in America with a constitution. I mean, Americans take it very seriously. And sometimes people are very enthusiastic, and sometimes there's violence. I mean, sometimes that happens, and that happens every generation, all the time. Again, the parallels, you can make them where you want to see them, and there's no wrong parallels. If you see it, you see it. But Americans have always taken a role in government. How much or how little is the difference?
I was asking earlier, where's the tipping point? And throughout history, can you pinpoint any areas or times where there was a tipping point and it changed the whole country?
I would think that happens regularly. Now, I'll only speak to America because I study the history of the North American frontier. But every generation kind of has their moment where things change. My book, The Whiskey Rebellion, was the second largest rebellion in American history, behind only the Civil War, the greatest crisis of Washington's presidency. It fundamentally changed America. You go, a little further ahead, the War of 1812, fundamentally changes America. The Monroe Doctrine, 1824, fundamentally changes America. Andrew Jackson's presidency, 1828, fundamentally changes America. I think that's a important sort of testament to the resilience of our system, that it can take these massive paradigm shifts where everything changes, but the system remains, the guardrails stay up. Mm-hmm. Through modern day, who knows what tomorrow brings, but the election of Donald Trump, again, changes America. Mm-hmm. I think every president's pretty consequential personally, but we make these giant changes all the time.
Yeah. And as we hear in the media and all the time is that we're approaching a constitutional crisis. And we get into the Constitution when we continue and, what ignited the Whiskey Rebellion and how that has an effect on our history. Our guest is Brady Kreitzer. He's an author, historian, and educator at Robert Morris University and Community College of Beaver County. I'm Mike Romigh, and we'll continue.
Welcome to Live Mike with Mike Romigh. This is the show that talks about what's happening in Beaver County. Noah Haswell will have news at the top and bottom of each hour. Now, here is the host of the show, Mike Romigh.
And our guest is Brady Kreitzer. He is an author, he is a historian, he's an educator at Robert Morris University, as well as Community College of Beaver County. He's a multimedia person. And tell the audience, besides doing radio interviews, you also work for Fox?
Yeah, I'm part of Fox Nation's American Revolution 250 coverage. So they've been filming documentaries and docuseries over the last really few years, and they plan on doing it into the future as well. Really well done. They interview a lot of great people, good reenactments. The 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, which we're in right now, I think deserves a lot of attention, and it's getting it. So we have a lot of events locally here in Western PA, which highlight the history of it. And I'm trying really to do my part to get us out there.
Yeah, 250th anniversary. We're hearing a lot about that today because the current president wants to have a big parade in D.C. It just happens to coincide with his birthday, his 79th birthday. How do you feel about that? I mean, because he wants it to be a military parade to celebrate the military, but people see ulterior motives involved with that. We've never had anything like that where, like in some of the communist countries, Korea, Russia, that they walk past the commander and salute him and all that stuff.
I can't say we've never done that. We've had celebratory parades before. It's certainly a more of a, since the second half of the 20th century, we stopped doing that for various reasons. I think if the parade was a celebration of our armed services and men and women in uniform, I'd be all for it. If it's really just about trying to make one person feel good, to me, that's not really a president's job. Because those people marching are not robots. They're people with families. We are a volunteer army. You're taking from them. Their time is valuable. Their job is important. If it was just for his own birthday celebration, I would have advised him not to do it. But he is the president. He was elected by a large margin, a pretty impressive margin in 2024. So that's where we are.
How much leeway do any presidents have in terms of upholding the Constitution or just to sign executive orders? And, what's happening with our judicial system today? As a historian, how do you see all this playing out?
Well, I always rank Donald Trump, probably now that, especially after he's reelected, in the top 5 most important presidents ever. And I don't mean that as a value judgment between good and bad. Important is important. It's not positive or negative, because these are 5 people that fundamentally change the way we view the presidency. George Washington would be on the list because he was the first. Thomas Jefferson changes the expectation of the presidency and how people view the office because he was the first alternative to the style of government they had. Andrew Jackson, 1828, fundamentally changes the presidency. He makes it an extension of the people. The Democratic Party is formed around his person. He makes the presidency seem something that people can touch. Teddy Roosevelt takes the presidency and makes it stronger than ever before, and he did that by doing things other presidents hadn't done. If you would have walked down the street in Washington, D.C. in 1890, and you would have asked someone, who's the most powerful man in this country, no one would have told you it was the president. They would have told you it was some backroom senator or some wheeler and dealer. Teddy Roosevelt changed that. So after Teddy Roosevelt, that's when people start to say, this is, the president's the most powerful person in the country. Franklin Roosevelt takes the presidency to becoming the most powerful person in the world. And you could argue that every president after Roosevelt, has filled that Rooseveltian view really from 1945 onward until Trump. Trump has changed the presidency. The fact that we're talking about a military parade means that we've what we expect from a president is different now. What we'll accept from a president is different now. He plays fast and loose with the Constitution. Many presidents have. Certainly many presidents have. So it all depends on how much we allow for that to happen. But just the idea of, Donald Trump tweeting out a picture of himself as the Pope or the potential next Pope, no president in history has ever done that. That would have been totally unacceptable if Barack Obama or George W. Bush did that. But Trump has lowered, I think, the personal standard of conduct of the presidency. He tweets out, insulting and pejorative things about women in his first term, female senators. That would have been, another president would have never dreamed of doing that. So he's definitely, as a personal figure, he's got kind of a unconventional style, maybe a bit crude, but that's why a lot of people like him as well. So I'm not trying to sit here and bash the president. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not really very political. But now moving forward, anytime any other president does something untoward, makes a comment he shouldn't have, the other side gets to say, well, Trump did this or that. And why you can't be mad at him. I remember when Barack Obama was criticized for wearing a brown suit. I remember when Barack Obama was criticized for saluting a Marine with a cup of coffee in his hand. No one's, talking about military parades. My gosh, if he had a military parade, that'd be very different.
Yes, it would.
It would have been. It's a different. So things are changing now. Hillary Clinton's emails. My gosh, we made such a to-do about these emails. Well, we just had the Secretary of Defense in a group chat spreading national security secrets on an unprotected server. I have no problem being angry about anyone's emails or mishandling documents, but you have to do it across the board, or you are a partisan, and I'm not interested in partisanship. So I have Trump in the top 5 or 6 most important presidents ever, just because these people have fundamentally changed how we view the office forever. It'll never be the same.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
We'll see. Yeah. History, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we are. How would you define our nation, our government?
Right now?
Yeah.
Here's all I care about. I care that the will of the people come first.
And let me interject here, because what you just said about these things that are acceptable now, so then the will of the people is let him do what he wants.
Well, he was, the first time he ran in 2016, he lost by 3 million votes. So you had a very legitimate reason to say, there's a critique there that's deserved of our system, of the Electoral College, which is a historical conversation. But he won by close to 3 to 4 million votes this time. It was an overwhelming victory. So the people are getting what they voted for. Donald Trump never promised to be anything but what he was. When he was shot at and hit in Butler, the man that was killed, Corey, he was a member of my church growing up. I used to lift weights with him. I knew him. That was a moment that I don't think any president in the last 100 years has had. There's bullets flying. Trump stands up and starts pushing back, trying to stand.
Fight.
You've never seen, I've never in my lifetime seen a president do that. Those are the kind of things that resonate with people. And that's part of the reason I think he won. Was maybe he's the man for the moment, maybe he's not. But the people got what they voted for. So whether you like him or not, that's all I care about.
And constitutionally, you, as a history professor, as a history expert, constitutionally, where are we by today's standards in comparison?
Well, that's always a work in progress. In the 1790s, during the Washington presidency, farmers here in Western Pennsylvania believed their rights were being trampled upon. They fought the revolution for a country of their own. What they got was their taxes raised and their whiskey, their primary economic engine, regulated. They didn't want that. So they felt like their constitutional rights were violated. In 1828, Andrew Jackson becomes presidency. I always come back to him because the parallels with he and Trump are so extraordinary. They call him King Andrew I, and there's a famous cartoon of him standing on top of the Constitution, ripped to pieces. Abraham Lincoln, the man that is universally agreed to be our greatest president. A lot of people don't realize he was hated in his own time by about half the country. And not just over a North-South issue. They believed he was abusing constitutional authority, arresting people without warrants and holding them without trial. They call him a tyrant, a dictator. So every generation has their moment. Franklin Roosevelt, during the New Deal, conservatives wanted to stop his New Deal policies because they believed they were an overreach of government. The Supreme Court seemed like it was going to agree with them. So he called the Supreme Court to the White House and he told them, there's 9 of you now. I can add as many as I want. What if I added 7 more? And we have 16 justices, and then they'll all vote my way. And they backed off and didn't hear the cases. That would be an egregious abuse of power by today's standards, and it was then too.
But he has the right to do that.
But he has the right to do that, and that's what I'm saying. So the question we have to ask is anything the president's doing today outside of his right to do it? Mm-hmm. And in the second term, the first term, there were things, and he was impeached for them. The only president to be impeached twice, Donald Trump. But everything he's doing now is within, that we know of, within the guardrails of the Constitution. So if you don't like what's happening, the good news for you is we have an election coming up this year. We have an election the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. And if we keep doing it right, we'll keep that pattern going. So you have a voice to speak out. But I'm not one of these hair on fire kind of fanatics. When you study history, as I said to you earlier, Mike, nothing is new. We've seen things like this all the time. Someone has to remain steady in the face of the 24-hour news cycle, which now has become like the 6-hour news cycle. And it's going to be the historians that do it. So I refuse to get too far one way or the other on any modern topic.
With 3 branches of government, has Congress just let their responsibilities go by the wayside, just stepped out of the way?
I can't say the party in power has done anything much differently. We've seen it your whole life, Mike, right? State of the Union, half of the House stands up and claps, half sits down. Republicans are doing what parties in power that control the White House do, which is mostly, not totally, but mostly not getting in the way of the president's agenda. What I think is unique is that Democrats today, if there's one thing we've learned about them, they are a terrible opposition party. They're not doing anything. No. They're holding up signs at the State of the Union with thumbs up and thumbs down, like they're sitting on the Capitol steps singing and clapping. Like, guys, you're legislators. You don't have to go. Your job is to be the loyal opposition. Mm-hmm. That's the way it's always been. So I think Democrats need a little bit of fire in their bellies right now because they're too interested, I think, in becoming viral clips and posts than actually blocking political agendas. I mean, my gosh, look at what Mitch McConnell, when he was the Senate Majority Leader, did to stop Obama's political agenda. He literally blocked a Supreme Court justice from being seated. He pulled out all the stops, and the most you're getting from the Democrats are photo ops and protests. So they need to step up. Mm. But that's what I would say. I don't think Congress is doing anything untoward yet. They usually help the man in power when they are the party in power, but I don't think I've seen an opposition party do so little yet complain and so much. There are things Democrats could do to rein Trump in, but they haven't seemed to either have the stomach or the interest in doing it yet.
And the judicial system, from the Supreme Court on down, federal judges now being jailed, being threatened. Where does that stand? Because, again, we're 3 branches of government, and it just seems like the 2 branches aren't responding.
The judiciary is supposed to be impartial. for the most part, they were. I mean, we could have had a serious constitutional crisis in 2020 when the Trump administration began suing across the country to invalidate legitimate votes. And I understand there's this story about the election being stolen. It really wasn't. We have a very secure voting system. We really do. And that's going to sound like news to some people because they've been fed so much of the other side. But, you know, presidents have a lane. We have a separation of power. We have an executive branch, a judicial branch, a legislative branch that are co-equal, and they have checks and balances. The idea of a president threatening to jail or imprison a judge they don't agree with is beyond acceptable. And I think, you know, Americans maybe are taking a little more of a stake in the Trump presidency than before, because, again, they legitimately voted him in an overwhelming number to be there. Case in point, for about a month, Donald Trump was talking about maybe running for a third term, which is constitutionally impossible without an amendment. Just today, he sort of announced, I'm not really interested in that. I think when you have people voting for him who are not political hardliners, putting a stake in, I think there's a little bit of this idea, this feeling that, okay, we're giving you a shot here, don't make us regret it. So whenever he's elected only by his most fervent partisan followers, he can say and do what he wants. Whenever you have, middle-aged white women in the suburbs voting for him, he's going to be on a tighter leash. That's my 2 cents. Again, I'm a historian, so I don't really deal with these political trends. Even though I clearly am, but how
can you avoid it?
Give it a couple of years and check back in with me. But that's where we stand.
Well, you're a professor. You're a educator of young students at Robert Morris and at CCBC. When you're talking about history, then they're involved. They're curious about all this as well.
They are much. Yeah, I would say yes. And I would say it's much more from the younger women than the younger men. I of course, have male students who are engaged, but young women, 20, 21, 22 years old, they see what's happening in this country as, in many ways, a threat to them. So I don't want, maybe a threat's not the best way to say that, but they have a stark interest. They are a generation that has lost a right. In 1974, when Roe v. Wade is decided on by the Supreme Court, women have a constitutional right to an abortion. And I'm not weighing in on abortion here, but it's staggering when I had a young woman come up to me and say, when the Supreme Court struck that down, I realized I had less rights than my grandmother, who's in her 70s. Mm-hmm. And that really stuck with me because that's a young person that really cared. Now, however you feel about abortion, it's not my idea. But as far as young people, they took to heart what I tell them in class all the time. And what I want to tell you is that do not be in a big hurry to give up your rights, because once you lose them, they never, ever come back. So even if you don't exercise a right, say, for example, gun ownership, think very long and hard before you waive that right, because once it's gone forever. And there's a lot of people in the world that would love to have the rights we have in America, and they'll never get them. So we have rights. That's a good thing. If you give them up, they're gone forever. So be sure you want them gone.
Mm-hmm. Brady Kreitzer is our guest. And who was the best president in your opinion?
I think it's pretty universal that it's Abraham Lincoln, simply because he saved the republic. I don't know if any of the 5 presidents before him or after him can navigate the Civil War like he did. It's that important. Washington's always number 2 or 3. Franklin Roosevelt's 2 or 3, depending on the kind of political atmosphere. I have written 8 books. George Washington's been in all of them. So I'm a major, believer in Washington as the man. George Washington did something that I wish we'd see from presidents today. This includes everyone from the year 1980 onward, essentially. Washington understood he was really good at some things, but he didn't know everything. And he assembled a cabinet. He didn't have to constitutionally, but he needed help. He knew what he was good at, and he knew his weaknesses, and he embraced those weaknesses, and he was not afraid to ask for help. So whenever you see people saying that I'm the only one that can fix this, or I'm the only way America survives, I always think, well, at least we know you're not Washington, because Washington knew what he knew and he knew what he didn't, and that's such a strong quality of leadership. You can't say that about Lincoln, for example. Lincoln liked to do things on his own and brought a lot of, controversy his way. But Lincoln, is always number one in terms of effectiveness. My personal favorite's President Washington. Without him, I think we all have different passports.
Very interesting. Brady Kreitzer, how can people get information? How can people get your books? Where can people find you when you're doing your next documentary?
I am not hard to find. Lexington and Concord is running on Fox Nation streaming app right now. I have a YouTube channel. I just did a new series on the Broadhead Road. That was the 1778 Revolutionary War Road. I located it and mapped it.
That's not the one right here in Center Township,
That's the one.
right?
That's
Is
the
that
one.
the one?
We drove it all the way. Yeah, that was the Continental Army's great foray into the frontier. So it connected Fort Pitt to Fort McIntosh, which went deep into Ohio, hopefully for an attack on Fort Detroit, the British position, which never happened. But it's a hugely important road, and we've paved over it, and we drive it every day and don't realize it's a 1778 road. So you can find me on YouTube, of course, Brady Kreitzer. All of my books are on Amazon. I host the weekly podcast for the Journal of the American Revolution. I'm an editor there called Dispatches every Sunday night. So worst comes to worst, just go to BradyKreitzer.com and shoot me an email, and I'll give you all the links.
Wow. Very, very busy young man, for sure.
I appreciate you calling me young. I'm almost 40.
Well, that's young. The Whiskey Rebellion is the latest, and there's another one called out. You said the National Highway.
The National Road comes out next year. It's really George Washington's attempt to unify East and West to prevent something like a Whiskey Rebellion, which obviously he doesn't. But it's a critical part of American infrastructure. It's America's first interstate highway, but it's really an early America story.
It's good to have you on the program.
Yeah, thanks,
Once
Mike.
again, you're an educator, and you educated me, and I hope a lot of my audience today with your knowledge of history.
You bet.
Thank you. Before noon at Beaver County Radio.